There is no talking about population, especially population growth, without including Thomas Malthus in the discussion. Malthus was a British scholar, a cleric, that's right, and an economist. He lived from 1766 to 1834, and in 1798 he published his very influential An Essay on the Principle of Population. He was influenced himself by a number of contemporaneous events and people, so things that were going on around him at the time. That included the Industrial Revolution, which of course begins in the 1750s in England. He saw population increasing rapidly around him at the time he was alive, which put increased pressure on the land to produce food. He was influenced, that's right, by Benjamin Franklin, who in 1751 wrote an article in a colonial newspaper, it might have been one of the ones that he owned, that was talking about population growth in the British colonies, the American British colonies, and how Franklin postulated that about every 25 years it was going to double. Malthus was probably also influenced by Jonathan Swift, who wrote A Modest Proposal in the beginning of the 1700s, and although satirical, Malthus undoubtedly was aware of it. And then Malthus in turn influenced Charles Darwin. Darwin's Survival of the Fittest comes basically from Malthus, and John Maynard Keynes. So if you take a look at the left-hand side, that's Malthus, and there's old Ben. I'm reading a biography on Ben Franklin right now, actually. He's kind of the most modern of the founding fathers. May not look like it there, but he was. So these were Malthus's ideas. He believed that the world faced a massive crisis, and while it may not be imminent, it was coming within a short period of time. What he said was that population would outstrip the ability of the earth to support people with agriculture. In other words, people would go beyond the carrying capacity. Carrying capacity is, of course, the ability of the land to support a population with farming, with agriculture. Malthus said that population grows geometrically, which is also known as exponentially, and agriculture productivity, in other words, food production, grows arithmetically. Here's what that means. If today there's one person, there's 1 unit of food for that person. But in 25 years, there'd be 2 people and 2 units of food. So both of these things have gone up. The number of people has increased because population has increased, natural increase rate, and the ability of the people to produce food has also increased. However, after 50 years, there's now 4 people and 3 units of food. So now there's more people than there is food. 75 years, it'd be 8 people and 4 units of food. And in 100 years, it'd be 16 people and 5 units of food. So you can see the way this is going. So one thing, which is food production, is growing 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on. That's the arithmetic growth. While the other thing is doubling. So 1 goes to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, and so on. That's the exponential or geometric growth. So you can see what's happening. There would, in about 50 years, according to Malthus, be more people than there was food. Let's take a look at Malthus's theory in the simplest graph you could have. So you could see production of food with one line, this line right here, and you can see population there. You see both of these things are going up, but population begins to outstrip food production right there, where you have the Malthusian catastrophe, which is more people than food. What happens when the number of people passes the food production? In other words, when there are more people than can be supported on the land with agriculture, carrying capacity, famine, wars for resources, and lots of death. However, Malthus had solutions to avoid these things. One of the solutions he called preventive checks. Preventive checks meant, for Malthus, decreasing crude birth rate by delaying marriage and practicing sexual abstinence. Remember, Malthus was not only a cleric, he lived in the 17 and 1800s. People did not regularly have children when they were not married. Now, Ben Franklin did, and Franklin's son did, but that was not a common thing back then. Or positive checks. This is Malthus's terminology, not mine. And that meant that population would be controlled through disease, famine, and war. But it didn't happen. Malthus missed that technology would increase food supply and keep it ahead of population growth. And he missed that there would be changing attitudes towards family size as time went on. The world did not remain as it was at the end of the 18th century, in other words. A woman named Esther Boserup came up with a kind of anti-Malthusian way of looking at things, which was that population sure would grow, but you could see her line is the blue line. That's food production. And you could see that as population grew, food production would in fits and starts keep up with it and even exceed it because of technological advances. You could see Malthus's Malthusian catastrophe happens right there. The green is food production for Malthus. Today, there are people who are called neo-Malthusians. And somebody who's a neo-Malthusian has this basic concept that Malthus was basically correct, but he was just a little early in his predictions. And we are headed towards a massive catastrophe because population is many times larger than it was at the time of Malthus. Remember, at the time of the Industrial Revolution, there were about 850 million people on Earth. Today, there's almost 8 billion. But the predictions are that populations throughout the world are likely to begin to go down in most places over the next 50 years.